Hey everyone, it's Raghu back with Mindrolling and my longtime partner, David Silver. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, Raghu. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're back with another episode of Just Ask the Experts. They know nothing. That's us. But we have high interest.
Yeah, and this particular subject matter we're going to
passion.
do, we're very close to it, actually. So I wouldn't call myself an expert, but as you'll see, the subject is very dear to our hearts.
So what we're doing today, is discussing, not in any scholarly fashion, because we don't do that. We are not. Well, David's more of a scholar. David, you are a scholar. Come on.
Yeah, another incarnation.
Oh, yeah. And it's all about Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche and his sons. He had 4 sons, all of whom were incredible, adept lamas. And one of them died. Oh, let's tell you who they are. And before we go any further, so I think I think he was the oldest. It's Tsikhe Chokling Rinpoche, who did die, I think, quite a number of years ago. And the ones that are active now that we actually have interaction with are Mingyur Rinpoche, Yonggi Mingyur Rinpoche, Tsokni Rinpoche, and Choki Nima Rinpoche. Now, all great, great teachers in their own right. Their father, Tulku Urgyen, was one of the great meditation masters, Dzogchen masters. Give us a little Dzogchen definition, Dave.
Well, it's of all the Buddhism types, it was the most Indo-Buddhist because they were, fascinated by different disciplines, and not just Buddhism as we know it, but also Buddhism and Indian philosophy and spirituality. And I think that Tulku Urgyen is the most appreciated in the West, except for the obvious ones, like, obviously His Holiness, but others. And I wouldn't say they were popularized, because there's nothing diluted or changed for us from what they said. They're just very clear to begin with, to say the least. And I've been, and I know you have too, Raghu, I've been completely drawn to their way of describing life and death for a long time, for 20 years or something, I don't know. And I'm very glad we're doing this, because although while I was sort of studying for it and everything, I realized this isn't one podcast's worth.
No.
You could do, many of them.
Yeah.
But Raghu, why don't you tell us a little bit about the family and the origins and everything?
Yeah. So this is my own relationship started with Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. Really, when he has a book called Blazing Splendor, which will be in the show notes. People will be able to hook up and get it. It's the memoirs of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. And he had a couple of Western devotees, shall we say, students, they would say, who actually sat with him over a long, fairly long period, like 10, 11 years. And at different times, they would just ask him, tell us stories of your time growing up in Tibet until the time in 1959, where you escaped from Tibet. And so this is they put this together in, I wouldn't say it's a bit of chronological. It tells you, where he was born and who his father was and his grandfather. I mean, these people came from a line of extraordinary adepts. Really, that's all there is to say about that. Not just and both women and men, not just men. And so this there's certain things in here that I want to just relate to give everybody an idea of what we're talking about. I mean, what immediately as I started reading this book, and I read it some time ago, many years ago, and just went back to it, the reality that was Tibet when Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche grew up is extraordinary on its own, totally extraordinary. And there's a wonderful preface, actually, by our good friend and guru brother, Danny Goleman. And I'm going to refer to that a little bit. But the gives you a bit of an idea. And what a world Tibet was before the communist invasion. In that world, sacred exploits were the yardstick of success. Just start there as a as a bit of a differential to where we are now in our modern age here, and especially these days. Love and appreciation of the great gift of the Buddha's teachings and for the masters who upheld those teachings were paramount. That was a legacy even the communists could not destroy. It was carried far and wide in the hearts of those who escaped the wanton destruction and devastation of their culture. And this book, Blazing Saddles, David, I kept referring to this as
Sorry,
the Blazing Saddles. You did that, now it's in my head.
I'm very sorry.
That's also a great movie, by the way, by Mel Brooks. It's really good.
It is.
Blazing Splendor recounts their fortitude, a victory of the strength of mind in the face of overwhelming odds. So that gives a little bit of an idea of what that time was like and how he grew up into it. It's quite extraordinary. Here's a couple of other anecdotes that will give a little bit of more context here. What's particularly intriguing about the stories in Blazing Splendor is the sheer length of time put into these practices by the masters of Tibet. I'm chuckling because when you read through what these people did, it seems like these are aliens from another planet, literally. While the lamas studied in modern labs, like Mingyur Rinpoche was studied in a lab with fMRI, I believe it's called, to be able to tell what his states were when they prompted him. I mean, just extraordinary stuff. While the lamas studied in modern labs have done at least 3 to 6 years of intensive retreat, it seems to have been routine for the masters of Tulku Urgyen's generation to have done 3 or 4 times that amount. Tulku Urgyen himself, for example, appears to have spent more than 20 years in intensive retreat, as was true of his late peer, the great Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who's our David and mine favorite. But some of the masters who lived their entire life in Tibet often did even more. Tulku Urgyen's father put in 33 years of meditation retreat over the course of his life. I mean,
Wow.
it's extraordinary. So science has now verified how powerful just 3 years of retreat can be in sharpening mental faculties. We can only guess what 20 or 30 years might do. No, I couldn't. I don't think so. From that perspective, we might do well to suspend our judgments about the seeming, quote-unquote, miraculous powers routinely ascribed to those Tibetan masters of the past. Who knows what might be possible for a mind so highly and exquisitely trained? So anyhow, that gives you a bit of a perspective of the extraordinary commitment these people had to attaining a state of consciousness where there was, They left behind the me and you stuff, the separation, the polarization. Basically, that was one major, obvious hurdle to get through before being able to identify with whatever we want to call it, the pure mind, supreme, whatever. So out of that, what happened is these sons of Tulku Urgyen, and Tulku Urgyen, I believe, also came to the West. I'm not so sure.
Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
I think he did.
So it wasn't like, his sons were the first, but they followed him, and they have been very prominent here in the West, particularly Dzogchen Rinpoche and Mingju Rinpoche. I mean, they do spend a lot of time here. I've had Mingju on a couple of podcasts. They are not shy of delving in through new technology to reach people who are interested in what they represent and so on. And David has been focusing on this amazing book, In Love with the World, from Mingyu Rinpoche, which is the story. Well, let me let you tell everybody.
Yeah, I did see Minjur.
Dave, can you just
talk.
point that mic more?
Yeah, sorry.
No, the top of it.
Like that?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Okay. I went to a lecture by Minjur a few years ago, and and it was the most crystalline, clear thing I've ever been to. I mean, you remember Raghu? There was a neuroscientist with him whose name I've temporarily forgotten.
Richie Davidson.
Right, and they both sat on the stage and swapped insights about the brain and the mind. And it's funny, I was kind of. It was the Riverside Church, I think, and there were a few hundred people there. It was quite packed, and I was so completely taken by every syllable of every word of every sentence that this rather young man said for an
real
hour and
young
a half.
at that time. I don't think he's more than 50 right now. 48.
He was probably in his mid-30s, I think. And just to show you how compelling he was, sitting in front of me, right in front of me and my wife, were three Japanese women. Girls, really. We estimated that they were about 17 or 18-year-olds. And before he came on, they chatted and in a few languages, and they were obviously gossiping. And we assumed that when Minjur Rinpoche came on the stage, they would stop. But they didn't.
No.
And, this is one of those things that happens that Ram Dass is very good at explaining. At first, I turned to Sandra and I said, they're talking. I want to hear him. What's the matter with them? Why are they here? I'm pissed off here. And then suddenly that all changed. And they didn't stop talking. They didn't stop gossiping pretty much through the entire hour. But I couldn't hear them and I couldn't even see them. Because the wisdom and clarity that was coming out of Minjur and his colleague was so sparklingly lucid to me and so answered so many questions that I'd had in that 1 hour or an hour and a half or whatever it was. I didn't even notice that these three young women were just seemingly not interested at all. And
so
I couldn't even,
Jeez.
it was. And I was shocked by the fact that I didn't care. The point came when it seemed like in the perspective of being in the presence of this master, I could hear him clearly no matter what was going on. But I chose to, when Raghu and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I chose to focus on Minjur's book, In Love with the World, because the subject, the main spine of the book, is really how to deal with the bardo of dying. And the entire book really is about that, involving the 6 bardos, which he describes in great detail, which I will in a moment. But the actual story, it's a story, the book. It's not a treatise or a sutra or an analysis. What this book is about is Minjur's escape from the monastery and journey into the world that he'd never encountered except as a great Tulku. But by that, I mean, he was protected at all times, like royalty.
Totally.
And, and the analogy with Buddha himself is quite clear. A prince of a sort. And he had comfort, not great comforts, of course, but normal comforts in the monastery. There were showers, there was food, there was, radio, there was stuff. It was normal. And he was very happy and contented in that. But then, because of his father, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche's comments some years earlier, he just decided that this wasn't really important, this safety net, this what Pema Chodron calls the comfort zone. He thought he was learning nothing and was not valuable enough to teach anything, given that he was not with the people. He was not with daily life. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. So he actually had to escape from the monastery. He was the abbot of the monastery. He wasn't just a monk. He was the head of it. He was the ruler, if you like. And it's pretty strict, and he loved it. He did retreats, many of them, and while he was abbot. But to get out of there and not tell anyone, which his father had sort of implied that he should earlier on, he had to wait for everybody to go to sleep. And then
he did tell his father, though. His father knew he was going over.
Well, his father did not know at that moment.
No?
His father had spoken about it earlier, about getting away. But according to the book, at any rate, he had to escape with nobody knowing it, except one person in the monastery who would help him. He had to climb over a wall, a gated wall, and then wait for a cab that never came, and then walk endlessly to the nearest place. And finally got to Varanasi, the home of the Ghats, where people are...
Benares, everybody.
Benares, yeah. Where people are cremated. And
thousands of years along that river.
Yes, and the Ganges is flowing there. And he got there and he lived there without any of the accoutrements of an abbot or a monk or anything. He kept his monk's robes for a bit, but then he had to discard them. And what actually happened was that he was in that railway station, he was on a train, it was just misery beyond words. Now, anybody who's been to India and has traveled in the sort of lesser type of trains knows that there are, as he called it a hell realm, simply a hell realm, where everybody was stuck together and you couldn't move. The smells coming from the toilets were just appalling. There was no food. There was hardly any drink. It took forever. People did not care about him, which was the first time this had ever happened to him. And he thought it would be easy, like, well, did one care about it? He went through a lot of changes about the fact that he was just invisible to these people. They looked at him because he was wearing the robes. But eventually he got to the station, and the station, if anything, was worse. And he lived in the station for a few days. There was a dormitory there which you could pay 3 rupees or something for and live in, and that was disgusting, and he was in there too. And things were going on around him which were just, to most Westerners at any rate, would be intolerable. But even to him were pretty intolerable. And then he left there and finally rested in a sort of a graveyard, a kind of crematorium graveyard.
Cemetery,
Yeah, in a cemetery. And just sat on a wall, and he had to beg for food. And when you beg for food in that situation, you're getting leftovers. Actually getting food. He'd go to 2 restaurants that he knew about, and he'd go and he'd beg for food, and they'd slurp off the leftovers from the previous night or from that night, and he would eat those. And he knew that when he was doing this was dangerous. And it was dangerous because he got poisoned. And he had bouts of diarrhea and cramps that were interminable. And he eventually got really ill and then was close to death. And no hyperbole there, that's what happened. He could not move. As he put it, the heaviness of the passing human came upon him. He felt like he was going below the earth with weight. He also began to not be able to see or move. If he wanted to adjust something, he had to take his hand and move it with the other hand. He was so weak. He could not stand up. And it was just the worst. But
He was
point
dying.
of the yes, he was dying for sure,
Yeah.
and he did it deliberately. I mean, he didn't know exactly how this would happen, but he knew something bad would happen because he just knew that. So the point of all this, he wasn't just a nepo kid who was playing, like, in a movie
Right.
about homeless people or something. Nothing wrong with that, but he wasn't that. He wanted to know what his father and his brothers believed, and he believed, and how to prove it, well, was to get as close to the moment of passing as is humanly possible without dying. And then his complete philosophy and their philosophy, the Dzogchen philosophy and the branch of the Dzogchen philosophy that they were about, of cognitive emptiness and luminous light and luminous being and oneness with the entire nature of life being beyond universe, beyond metaverse, beyond solidity, beyond certainty, changing always, transitory always. Because he put himself in that position, he was as close to being a dying person as he could be, and then was to be able to, when he recovered, the way he recovered was ridiculous. He just passed out, and then everything disappeared, and he found himself in a hospital with tubes coming out of himself, and nurses and doctors, and it took him a while in there to finally realize that he was alive. He had to make a decision, and we've heard this from other philosophers and so forth. Do I let myself die because I could? And he wanted to because he felt that that was the only way to really liberate himself or anyone else or any other sentient being on the planet. And so what he did was he was able to calibrate how to get as close as possible and then to come back. Not that he really wanted to come back, but he felt a duty to go on teaching what he was learning, not only at that moment, but in the decades before that moment. So in terms of philosophy, spirituality, the canon of Buddhism and so forth, this was the realest it could get for him to be able to say, this is what it is. His father's books, the most famous ones that are not biographical, are called As It Is.
Which?
And As It Is, right? Isn't
As
that
It
the name?
Is, yes, right. The collection.
This is his version of what is, permanently, without interruption, eternally, and what someone else, who I don't remember, called infinite intelligence. And you can't go there unless you die. And it makes sense, all those years of training and retreats. And the retreats of the Dzogchen are based in 3 parts: outer, inner, secret. Those 3. So that this retreat into death, diarrhea, seeing people in filth, seeing people in the worst condition that a human being can be in on this planet, apart from being in a concentration camp or being murdered. And coming to that point where he saw that this thing that we're doing right now, life, is a fleeting, well, he actually calls it a hologram at one point, which is rather, typical of what people say these days. Westerners talk about it like that. But he wasn't talking about it not being as real as real. He was saying, this is real while we live it, but it's fleeting and it will not end. It will not end. You will die. And if you want to do this without all the morbid, depressed, lost, questioning, angry responses of the people who you love and
Fearful,
they love you.
Yeah.
No. Just follow the teaching of the ones that have actually had the vision to have that knowledge. And as Raghu said, all those years of retreat and of separation from the, what we consider to be part of our lives, totally. I mean, yes, these guys had cell phones. They knew about things like that. They weren't ignorant of any of that.
Well, not, we're talking about the sons, not the dad.
Sons, yeah. Well, no, the dad. The dad died just before cell phones happened,
Yeah,
1996.
exactly, yeah,
And they happened
yeah.
in 97, I believe.
Yeah.
But, so, the concept of cognitive emptiness is, and I hope this doesn't sound like some kind of hubris, is actually the most interesting thing that I'm interested in. because as you get older, and we're older, it seems appropriate to begin to spend time on how to do this. You do it with everything else. You learn to swim, you learn to read, you learn to have children, you learn to look after children. So why don't we learn how to die in the West? Why is it such a nightmare for almost everyone? You know, I mean, if a pet dies, if a lover dies, if a child dies, we're not taught to deal with this because people don't know.
Yeah.
So these lessons, and I have, multiple notes here that I want to get into, and I'm sure Raghu's got to say, about how they describe cognitive emptiness as being the force of the universe, the actual reality beyond all this. And there's no question about it. He doesn't mess around with words. This is a dream. And it's a special kind of dream, but it's still a dream.
Yeah.
And in order to affirm that, you have to get into the Dzogchen headspace of cognitive emptiness, infinite intelligence. That's a tall order.
Yeah, well, let's even start. What is cognitive emptiness?
Well, it goes beyond all the theories that all the religions have to begin with, all of them, because it's got nothing to do with saviors or any of that.
Well, what's the definition of cognitive? Let's start there.
That it is a thinking emptiness, and not thinking in the way we think, but it has cognitive power within the universe, within the metaverses, within the whole damn thing. It is the only true, unadorned, undreamt reality behind and throughout our lives and everybody else's lives, and that it is it's a resource, because it is the power behind everything. So the oneness that Spinoza talked about, the monad, the concept that we are all one unquestionably, is most evident when you talk about this invisible, undetectable intelligence, which is there, and we know it's there, but it also gives us an intuition about the power of the mind and the need to look into the mind, which Buddhism is all about. It's all about finding out what is the mind. What is that mind? When we die, does it go away? Or does it join something else? Or is it, what happens when we die? Are we dead and gone and nothing to do with anything? Or are we now part of something so much deeper, more profound, and more profound is like a stupid way of putting it. It is the essence of profundity. It is the essence of life force. So the cognitive emptiness that is all the way through to Urgyen's books, as it is the sort of final, what can you say, corollary of Mingyur's books, that it must look towards what is behind this, what works through it, and what perspective does that give us about the way we live when we live. Because he's saying all the time, I'm sorry, I'm going on a lot, but he's saying in the book, the bardos as a concept are things that we live through every day, not just that period between life and death. There are 6 bardos: meditation, dream, life, dying and death, and after death. He says that if we learn to give up rigid beliefs, rigid things that we hang on to, and we learn to forsake them in the appropriate time in this life, we are impersonating the actual progression of the bardos every day. Mm-hmm. He says, for instance, when he was on that train, that filthy train, it took him a long time to get over the smells and the sounds. But when he did, he could feel that the bardos were being enacted in his consciousness as he sat there on the floor, freezing cold on a train. And that learning about the bardos is not just learning about we live and we die, and everybody does that. It's what happens to us every single day. We live, we die. Something goes, something comes. A thought comes, it's important to us, and then we can't even remember it. An action happens, then it's gone. A marriage happens, and then it's a divorce. A lovely house you live in sets on fire, and then you're gone. It's gone. And all the stuff you live with. These things happen every second to everybody on 7 billion people. And his point in this book is not just to talk about being deprived of comfort and therefore learning to be a Buddhist monk. He was already a very high Buddhist monk. It's about the bardos being almost a metaphor we enact out as best we can in this life to let go, to find non-attachment, and not to be too attached to anything at all, including things you really think you should be attached to, like your mother. Yeah. That's a whole other story, because then you get into mother and child Buddhist, emptiness, which is another.
I just want to delve into back to Dzogchen, because I think we haven't really. We have given it, you have given it some definition, but Dzogchen is a very advanced system of meditation on the deepest, subtlest, foundational levels of mind. Okay, mind refers to the unbroken mental activity of cognitively engaging with objects. Therein, cognitive emptiness, which obviously goes beyond that duality. Described from another point of view as the mental activity of giving rise to appearances, mental holograms. The term Dzogchen means, quote unquote, great completeness, referring to the fact that all the qualities of Buddhahood are complete on the level of pure awareness, which they call Rigpa, the deepest foundational level of them all. Although nothing needs to be added to what's called beginningless and endless, which is they term basic Rigpa, nevertheless, these qualities aren't functioning now at their full capacity. Why? Because the obscuring factor, I love this so much, the obscuring factor of dumbfoundedness, bedazzlement, in next to it they have in the quotes, has been simultaneously arising with it also without beginning. Okay, try and get that one. The obscuring factor of dumbfoundedness is like you are blown away. Some of this, of course, happens with psychedelics because of the power and the intensity of some hours-long experience.
Yes.
Dumbfoundedness is an automatically arising unawareness of the empty nature of all phenomena. The total absence of impossible ways of existing. I mean, where did they go to? This is like incredible stuff that they have codified. That's why, His Holiness Dalai Lama has been for many, many years. They've had this program at Emory University in Atlanta of sending monks in there. And there's a lot of, testing going on. They're testing their own theories, their own philosophies, through scientific means, through fMRI, which they did with Mingyur Rinpoche, to verify the veracity of what they have developed over this incredible span of time. And this all came from India. This all came from India, especially eventually from the University Nalanda in northern India, where some of the great seers were stationed, shall we say. And the other thing that's interesting, Dave, is just, it's in this book. There's so much miraculous stuff in stories in this book that Tulku Urgyen relates to these two people, his students. Mm-hmm. And they include, all the way, his grandmother apparently had a perfect recall of all these events. And that's basically, it came through him how, and that's what this book is. It's through her. And she says, during the 2 periods of the first flourishing of Dharma in Tibet, masters and disciples, and even the disciples' disciples, attained a profound level of realization. Some displayed extraordinary signs of their accomplishment, such as soaring like flocks of birds through the sky. Wherever they took flight and wherever they landed, they left footprints in solid rock. This is not just a legend from the past. These imprints are visible even today, so you can go and look for yourself. Such was, and this is Tulku Urgyen saying, such was the country where I was born. So he emphasizes, this is, you've got to look into this yourself to, look at the veracity of this stuff. I mean, veracity and miracles don't quite go together, 2 words that are in opposition, really. But, I had the fortune, as Dave knows, to be with Neem Karoli Baba in the early 70s, along with a bunch of other Westerners. Of course, I followed Ram Dass back there. And so I know everything is possible through that experience. I mean, there's no doubt that, they can fly like a flock of birds through the sky. I have no doubt about it. But in terms of the reality of somebody reading this stuff, he's just saying, have an open mind. I mean, whether or not you trust these stories that come through me from my family and so on is a whole other subject. But imagine if you say to yourself, you never know. All is possible, and you have that curiosity. That's a big thing I think we take from these people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he would say too, because I'm just looking at my notes here, he says, this is what Mingyur says, on a more practical level, he says, we don't need to wait until we physically die in order to know the bardo of becoming. Most of us have had plenty of experience with feeling sane and stable, and then sometimes we fall apart. And these are very practical things. He's talking about life things, that the practice that he teaches and obviously lives is, how can you put it? He's saying that to really not fall into the trap that this life is permanent, because it sometimes seems so. You have the same face in the morning that you had when you went to bed. Your children look pretty much the same. But then suddenly everything falls apart. And somebody dies, or someone is murdered, or things like that happen. And what the sons and the father and the mother and the grandmother all knew were these teachings were there not for some highfalutin million hours of meditation, eating, vegan food and avoiding killing animals and all those good things. It's nothing to do with that. What it was a practical way of saying we can avoid fear by confronting what is the real truth behind life. And, his father said one time, he was a boy and he was trying to impress his father. Mingyur was trying to impress Urgyen, and so was meditating, obviously, meditating. And his father said to him, what are you doing? And he said, Father, I'm meditating. I'm really meditating. And Tulku Urgyen said, meditation is a joke. It's a fake. It's not real. I want to quote this exactly because I don't just want to go on about it. He said, hold with me for a second because I have a lot of notes here. He said, basically what he said was, meditation's fine. We all meditate. We have to meditate to center ourselves and so forth. But it is not the thing. The thing is everything. So if you're, in a filthy hotel in India no one would want to be in except those that really can't afford anything better. That experience is as important as any highfalutin meditation retreat you could ever imagine going to. And he says at one point that his early life in a beautiful monastery with a fantastic mountain, a huge 14,000-foot mountain at the end of the street, kind of, the perfect place for meditation, contemplation, and wisdom. He said, nah, his father was bigger than that. He said, no, that's a little thing that's within the real truth. The accoutrements of spirituality were what they were very, very good about. And so, it's fine, let's meditate in a nice warm room. But that isn't it. The flowers in front of you and the altar and the puja, that isn't it. And there's nothing wrong with it if it leads you to something that is actually the reality behind this dream that we live. And in fact, Urgyen and his sons and all Dzogchen people believe that dreaming is as important as meditating. Because, as he puts it, the dreaming is dreams are fluid. Anything can happen in a dream. Anything. You can fly, you can walk right through a wall, you can be with the most beautiful person on earth just by thinking of them, all of that. And what Mingyur says is that is a perfect analogy for life itself. That life is as fluid and as evanescent and as transparent as that dream. But we don't know it because we think it's solid because we can't put our finger through our hand. But these Dzogchen masters say that that's fine. If that makes you happy, great. However, happiness and comfort are not the end, because when you get to the end, and we're all getting to the end, what is the panic? The panic is that you're going to lose all life. You're going to lose your personality. You're going to lose all your possessions, all your friends, everything you love, be it sports, be it food, be it sex, be it fashion, be it politics. It's all gone. And what they're doing is giving us equipment to not get lost in that and not get frightened by it, because fear doesn't have a place for them. You can't fear what doesn't exist, and what doesn't exist is what is in the impermanent realm. So that marvelous Suzuki motorbike that you just got in bright red, that you just love so much, it's fantastic. It's great. You get on it, you ride at 80 miles an hour down it, it's fantastic. But it too will go, and it may be actually not going and be perfect when you are dust. So these actualities, which are very harsh, at least in the words, but if you go beyond the words, which is what they're trying to help us do, is to understand the dreams and meditation are equal. Pay attention to your dreams, because the evanescent nature of them, the impermanent nature of them, the nonsensical, absurd nature of them sometimes, having dinner with an elephant or riding in a plane on the outside, these seem like the most stupid and ridiculous things, so we dismiss them. We say, but dreams are ridiculous. That's not what the Dzogchen believe. The Dzogchen believe that dreams, meditation, the preparation for death, the moment of dying, and after death are what's really going on here. And if you want to not be full of fear, like me, it's okay. I mean, I really believe all this, but it's a hell of a jump to go away from your life, Netflix, your car,
and
your
phone.
new glasses, this very well ironed shirt, those hills behind me, the river behind me, the fish in the river, the birds that fly over the river, they're all impermanent.
So
and
there
that's the whole thing, is to recognize the impermanence. Recognition is the thing that they talk about all the time. Or again, they all use that word all the time. It's not the event itself, it's the recognition of the event that will set you free.
And may I say, we just did a retreat in Maui called Love Amidst Impermanence, and we were bringing all of that in this time of great difficulty that we are in, that we're moving towards that reality of love, in unconditional love, not exchange love. Amidst what's going on now is extraordinarily important. There was one shall we, a mentor of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. His name was Shechen Kongtrul, not easily pronounced. They were talking about the higher, lamas, and Dilgo Khyentse was a contemporary of his. And then, so he was speaking to these great beings, and he referred to them as having high realization. So he said, I asked him what he meant by that. It is when your awareness is unimpeded and free of fixation, and yet you are acutely present and attentive to detail. I love that. That's like so plain spoken, right? And just to bring up something else from Dzogchen Rinpoche, because you always want, when you go into for me, when I go into these things, I like to get real down-to-earth help. What do we do to get anywhere near the states that David and I are talking about in this podcast? And so we just talked about being relaxed and alert and not fixated, right? He gave some, I thought, excellent recipe. First of all, it is rare, he says, when we are relaxed and alert at the same time. We may not even know this is possible. Forming new habits takes patience. That is a huge thing. And neuroscience and Richie Davidson and the work he's done have shown us that there is neuroplasticity. We can change the brain. And forming this new habit, but it takes patience. A key point of training to keep in mind, short moment. This is a great tip, okay? This is the tip of the podcast as far as I'm concerned. Short moments many times. For example, within a 20 or 30 minute session, it is usually more effective to practice multiple 3 to 5 minute sessions with a short break of a minute or so between them. Our ability to remain fresh will slowly and organically increase over time. This happens through repetition and habituation, not willpower. That's why I love these people, these sons of Urgyen. I mean, it's not just the grandiosity sort of Tibet and the ancient days and the miracles and the this and what Dzogchen really is. It's okay. They give us a way to practice, advice on actually practicing. I think that's phenomenal, actually.
Yeah, but breaks, he says, even when you sneeze or when you yawn, are little moments when you're not thinking about anything in the world except the whole damn thing. And, he's not kidding. I mean, you go, achoo, as he says, he writes achoo, and he's saying in that moment, when you do achoo, or you yawn, or you stretch, or something, those are actually incredible moments if you can just catch them. And they can create that thing they call the gap.
Yeah.
And it's not
Trump,
a closed story. It's the gap when suddenly, and it happens all the time. It happened to me a few days ago. I was walking. I walk every day, and I was walking in the woods, and then I saw a group of trees that were white because of the snow. It's been snowing here, and there were many of them, and they made a kind of a shape that was almost mandalic. It was sort of like that. The little trees were here, and then they went higher and higher, and they were white and they were glistening. And I noticed I wasn't really looking at them. I was entranced beyond belief. I stopped walking. I didn't even know I'd stopped walking. And I just stood there, and there it was. And as Krishnamurti said, it's not looking at the tree that's important, it's becoming the tree that's important. And I'm not saying I became those trees, but for a moment I forgot every single imaginable iota of my own obsessional life, like being. Not to say, he never says you shouldn't live your life because he also comes to the conclusion that Raghu just mentioned, that even if we're talking about cognitive emptiness, it sounds kind of cold, doesn't it? A bleak universe with one intelligence in it running everything. No, he says it's unconditional love. He says it's unconditional love. He uses those words, and they're the same words that Maharaji used, or Ramana Maharshi, or Yogananda, or that we often differentiate Bhakti yoga and devotional yoga from Buddhism. But Dzogchen was very interested in Northern Indian stuff. And in fact, when he was on this retreat of being close to death, he actually, in order to be in some temples, took off his robes and put on a dhoti and a very diaphanous Indian outfit, which we've all seen, the pants and the top, the white, it's so hot, and did that and felt very strange in it. He'd never worn anything like that. He'd never worn anything since he was a child except those maroon robes, And he said just taking off the robes was a death. You see, that's what he's saying all the time, that this Dzogchen Buddhist drive is towards impersonating the actual trajectory of your life into becoming comfortable with like his father was. When his father was dying, Mingyur was sitting next to him and was crying. And Tulku Urgyen said to his son, "Don't worry about me. Don't worry, I'm happy. This is great. This is great." And for a Westerner to grasp that is very hard. I recently...
Understatement, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I started rewatching 6 Feet Under, the HBO series.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a brilliant series, and I recommend it to you very much, because it's a very spiritual show, actually. It's about a family that live in a funeral parlor. They've had that for generations. And it's all about death, and every show starts with a particular way of dying. An individual, either just completely out of the blue, gets hit by a car, or gets sick, or any of those things. So it's really about death. And when I was watching that, I realized that the writers of that show had wisdom, because what they did was they were constantly showing you that you're going to die, but you need some form of practice to get to it with equanimity. Of all things, you have to have equanimity at that moment, in that time. And you don't want people crying and, being alone is probably better. I think Shantideva said that.
Yeah.
That just being... In fact, let me quote. This sounds like a newscast or something. But Shantideva said... God, I'm sorry to be so... Here we go. Where did he say it? Just hang out while I'm finding this. Have a cup of tea or something. Anyway, he said this. Shantideva said this. If such a thing as I exists, indeed, then terrors, granted, will torment it. But since no self as I exists at all, what is there left for fears to terrify? And Mingyur quotes Shantideva. I'm not just pulling out of my hat. The whole movement towards this is saying that there is such a thing as deathlessness. And it is the most optimistic possible word in the English language, because it says that all the torment we go through, I mean, it's not unnatural to be sad when a loved one or a friend dies. Of course. He's not saying, don't be sad, let's have a party. He's saying, of course you're going to be sad. You're a human being. You're on that level. You were born into that level. You're going to have that emotion. But the question is it bad to die? Is it bad? And he says, irrevocably not. That it's a great joy because you're liberated from all this mishigosh.
Mishugos.
Miss you.
His brother, since we're on this subject, so Dzogchen, he did a lot of work also with Richie Davidson and on meditation. he said they discovered a remarkable gap. There were countless findings on popular benefits of meditation, becoming more calm, focused, relaxed, all the new agey stuff, better health, other such payoffs. But there was very little research on how pursuing meditation lessens our ego grasping and virtually zero on selflessness. And what Dzogchen calls selflessness, the mere, all of this, the mere I. That's his term, the mere I. He sees this as the healthiest I, where we hold our sense of self lightly, as we do every other thought or emotion. That's huge right there and then. We recognize our uniqueness and whatever value there may be in, say, our social I, but see it all as a mere display, like a reflection in a mirror. We can be playful or serious as the moment calls for, because we are not limited by neediness or the need to defend some sense of ourselves. Gee whiz, that's what we're doing day in, day out, if you really have enough mindfulness. Not judgy mindfulness, but mindfulness that allows you to see through your selflessness.
So really...
completely available to the needs of another person, is what he says.
Yeah. That has to be in there. But I mean, another, quote that he says, when you realize that impermanence is the norm, and then he says, Minjur says, generally, the experience of ourselves as nothing and no body is simply unbearable. And so this teaching is to sort of shatter that, for us and say, no, it's okay. We all know we're going to die. And we all make a big fuss when people get old and they're not dead yet, and and we say, well, I mean, if Keith Richards can, it was his birthday yesterday, if he can survive to 82, then I can. Well, yes, and that's all very interesting and nice, but it's still sort of Netflix talk, because it's not the ultimate destination. And if we're not ready for the ultimate destination, then it will be a real drag, both for the... I have an example that's rather dear to me. A friend of mine was very sick some years ago, and he was a rock and roll producer and produced all kinds of sort of punk music, and he was very tight with Blondie and David Byrne and all those people. And he was in hospice. And he had some kind of music playing one time when I went to see him. And I didn't say anything, but then when I went the second time to see him, I brought a beautiful little Buddha, and I put it on the table next to him. And in my sort of teaching vibe, I said, maybe you should listen to the Shartse monks or the Gyoto monks chanting while you're in this state. And he didn't argue, because he didn't have the energy to argue, actually. And then the third time I visited him at Montefiore Hospice, he was listening to the Shartse monks, and the Buddha was still there. And he said to me, isn't that great? That is so great, man. And to him, so like 4 weeks before, the highest you could imagine him believing in anything would be a mixture of Bob Marley and Talking Heads. That was the supreme. But as he approached death, I began to feel sorry. I thought, yeah, that's all very well. I like those two bands too and all that. But you're going to die in an hour or something. So the most compassionate thing you can do in terms of unconditional love is to try and, without being, being a drag, being forceful, but doing it unconditionally and with love and respect for the person, you can bring them to a place where death is seen as a great liberation into luminosity instead of blank nothingness. I am now nothing, And so these teachers, as Raghu so perfectly put it before, they're not talking about... Yes, you can talk about the flying monks of so-and-so, and they can fly. And we know that because they just make themselves lightweight, the weight of light. But what they're really doing is showing us how to live and die. And Urgyen said, living is an illusion, dying is an illusion. So, ergo, deathlessness is what we seek internally our whole lives, even though we're distracted by living. But as long as we remember that living is this, and dying is similarly this, an illusion, and that the truth lies beyond our little crania up here.
And bottom line, these people, these sons particularly of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, are really, the three that are left, that are really passing along information to us in the West that can get us to an understanding of what we've been, quoting from and talking about in this podcast. It's extraordinary that that's happening. And then when you think of it, he was forced out, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, out of Tibet, along with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and, Karmapa. I mean, so many of these great beings, and we got the benefit of it. I've always wondered at that. We got the benefit of that, which is amazing.
It's a mystery, really, because you'd think we, in our Western objectification of reality, would be the last people who would be receptive to this. But because of our torment, we are the first people to be receptive to it. We're more receptive to it than they are because they know it. And
as Maharaji said, or Ramdas has said, this suffering brings us closer to God. So that's certainly happening. So we're at the end of our show, Dave.
Oh, come on.
got
all this.
I know. I'll tell you what. You know what? It's true. We should have a part 2
Let's do it.
features the methodology that can help us. I mean, we've both mentioned it here and there, but we've more talked about the reality of Dzogchen, what this master Tulku Urgyen was, and what his children were, his sons. We should take it a little further. We'll do that next time.
And also, just to say something I really deeply believe, if you were to look at most of what Ramana Maharshi said, and I have a book of quotes, not long things, quotes things, and then you put it into a Buddhist book and said it was Tulku Ramana Maharshi, you would not know.
Yeah.
In other words, there's no argument between devotional practice and Buddhist practice, because they're all moving towards the same thing, but they have different ways of expressing it, just like they have different accents, different languages, So there's no conflict there.
No conflict. This goes back to what we mentioned a billion times, and I have talked about, and Dave has talked, which is Neem Karoli Baba. One of the first things that he instilled in us, from the point of view of being what he was talking about. It was not objective at all, was there is only one, sub-ek, it's all one. And that allowed us to be free to, and all of us have been free to pursue all kinds of other studies and traditions and so on, to come to where we've shared this. I mean, look at Ramdas. I mean, everyone, all the way to the Quakers, to the Tibetans, to the insight meditation. I mean, so that reality is what you just expressed, really. We are going to have links. People are going to get all of the links to the books that we have quoted from, and Tulku Urgyen himself, and the other sons that are still with us.
Well, just this one. This is important to think about. This book here, the Bardo Guidebook by
who?
Choki.
Oh, so this is Choki Nima.
Yeah, and he.
Wow, I don't even know about that. So I'm going to get that. So we're going to have a link there too.
Well, he says, just as a final, he says. He says, the most important bardo is that of this life. Everything that comes after depends on this life. And therefore, you don't have to think about some supramental, that's not this life, But our dealings in this life and our direction and our trajectories and our practice is more important than anything, because it takes us to those places. If we do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll continue this next time
Let's.
we do something, David and I. And meanwhile, thanks for being here. And it's kind of nice looking into the river. It's a huge river behind you, the Hudson River and the mountain, the hills behind there.
Yes,
Not
you're
bad.
beginning to see it now. It's because
Not
of
bad.
the days leaving.
Yeah, yeah.
And it becomes very radiant at night,
Yeah.
and cold.
Thanks for being here, David.
Thank you.
Everybody, we'll be back next week with another Mindrolling. And please go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/Mindrolling, or just Be Here Now Network. And there's so many great podcasts that are up there at this point. Please take advantage. We'll see you next time.